Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Adam Routh. We recently attended the Center for a New American Security's Evolving the Future Force event in Washington, D.C., where the think tank launched its new report, Building the Future Force, Guaranteeing American Leadership in a Contested Environment, which recommends how the U.S. military can maintain its technological edge as its potential adversaries use some of those very same technologies to improve their capabilities. On the sidelines of the March 29 event, we spoke with two of the report's 5 authors, Jerry Hendrix, a CNAS Senior Fellow and Director of the Defense Program at the think tank, and Adam Routh, a Research Associate with the program. We asked them about the report's genesis and major findings, the impact of fiscal uncertainty on future force planning, their advice to Capitol Hill defense appropriators, and the legacy of their late CNAS colleague and report co-author, Shawn Brimley, who passed away tragically early this year at the age of 40 after a battle with cancer.
Building the Future Force Report is an outgrowth of the Future Force Advisory Council activities here at the Center for a New American Security. And this report actually came out of the first year of the Advisory Council's meetings, and then also out of a series of conversations that occurred with our internal staff within the Center for a New American Security. Specifically, some of the original conversations between myself and my former colleague Shawn Brimley, talking about sort of what the major challenges were, specifically about the idea of mobile targets and the challenge that presented. And so we then began to work not only between the two of us, but also with the 3 research associates that are within the Defense Strategies and Assessments Program to craft this report, first outlining it and then beginning to write it and then editing and bring together. Unfortunately, of course, we lost our colleague Shawn Brimley as we came to final publication of this. And so today, and the rollout of it is kind of a celebration of also his contributions over time here at the Center for a New American Security. Our hope with the report is that it will stimulate debate not only within the national security community, but also within the Pentagon and the decision makers as we really begin to look at these 3 principal challenges: finding targets, fixing them, long dwell, persistent ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and then how to speed the finishing of the target, the idea of between the finding of the target, identifying it, and then also putting a weapon on target in an advanced environment. So those are really the challenges, and we hope to follow up on that. This will be essentially a foundational document, and we will continue over the next few years to look at those things.
I think one of the findings that I guess surprised me personally was related to the kind of satellite architectures that we envision for the future. So there's a lot of talk about low-cost, low Earth orbit constellations of kind of more or less disposable type satellites that can provide persistent ISR based on the number of satellites that you employ. But during the research, we found that there's still a need for expensive geosynchronous satellites, which kind of contradicts the idea that more cheaper satellites could offset the cost of these larger, fewer expensive geosynchronous satellites. And what we found was that basically you can't remove geosynchronous satellites from the equation, that you're still going to need them. You're also still going to need air-breathing ISR platforms. So the idea that you can kind of produce this cheaper, in whole kind of ISR architecture didn't really pan out the way we envisioned or we had initially thought. And in reality, there's going to be a lot that is dependent on low Earth orbit constellations of satellites, ISR capabilities, and different things, but you're also still going to need some hopefully less expensive but still slightly more costly geosynchronous satellites, and then of course advanced air-breathing ISR architectures. We hope that people read the report. We think it's valuable. We think there's a lot of good information in there, and we hope that the findings of the report help influence future research for not just our organization but others, because it's an important topic whether it comes from CNAS or elsewhere. But having the variety of panelists and guests I think is important because it gives that perspective from not just industry and academia, but from also government. How do we think about this together as a whole of country approach, because we're going to need to do that to address the challenge we face in the future.
We are planning to move forward from this, so we have a series of meetings with the Future Force Advisory Council, and what we're going to begin with is a realistic look at the budgetary environment. We've of course had a significant plus up in the U.S. defense budget that covers the next 2 years, but then what does it look like beyond that so that we can sort of set the foundational groundwork of what resources are there. And then we're going to do domain by domain follow-up with that. So we'll look at air, maritime, ground, space, and cyber domains and wonder what the future looks like in each of those domains. So what are the challenges arising? How can we counter those? And then in the end, we're going to come back and take a look at the joint force. One of the things that we wanted to avoid was sort of an Army, Navy, Air Force Marine Corps approach to this, but in fact look at it domain by domain and then come back with sort of a joint force solution. So that's the plan going forward as it stands right now. We hold our meetings on a quarterly basis, and so that's going to take up probably at least the next 2 years of our activities with the Advisory Council.
Generally, it's composed of former government, academia, and industry partners. These are people who have deep expertise in a wide array of fields that give us a good scope of where to have these conversations, and we get the full breadth of kind of inputs that you need, because as some of the panelists have discussed today already, it's not just about what the government does. A lot of innovation happens outside of government, so you need those industry partners to tell us what they're working on, how they're working on it, where the government can help them work on things, and how more efficiently you can use that government-industry integration. And of course the academics, because who doesn't like a good academic? Actually,
we find the national security strategy and the national defense strategy to be very useful for us in our deliberations, in the sense that they recognize at last that we are involved in a great power competition, and specifically names those we're competing against, China and Russia, and specifically talks about anti-access, air denial environment. So it's good that we have a clear definition of the threats and the challenges that we're facing. I also appreciate the fact that both of those documents highlight the balance or the need to look at both capabilities and capacity. That's something that really is at the heart of our deliberations. So whether we need to invest in continued high-end capabilities, sort of the war-winning technologies, or what degree of balance do we need with growing the force, i.e. capacity, growing the Army, growing the Air Force, growing the Navy or the Marine Corps as a part of the solution set. And so we really do think that those documents are foundational, that they ask the right types of questions, and they will help us frame Future Force Advisory Council work going forward. Fiscal uncertainty is never good for these types of situations, and part of that is if you know that you're going to have larger budgets, then you can plan accordingly. If you know you're going to have smaller budgets, you can plan accordingly. As it is, by not really knowing beyond the next 2-year horizon what we're going to have, we're unable to plan either way. It would be nice to know that you're going to have increased resources, that you're going to grow back to 4% of GDP in the defense budget, and that you have that amount of money. It would also be good to know that we're heading down to 3%, and then we're back into one of those situations like Churchill said that, you know, gentlemen, we've run out of money, it's time to start thinking, where we start going with innovative, creative solutions on how to field the force for the future. As it is, the fiscal uncertainty actually puts a lot of flexibility into the system, and it really makes it difficult to do future force planning. And so we'll be watching very carefully to watch the processes on the Hill to see if the Hill can manage to get out of its own way and give us some sort of a sound fiscal plan that covers the entire fight-up going forward.
What I would tell legislators and those on Capitol Hill about what we need to do to be prepared for the future fight is to think critically about what our adversaries are doing and think about how that's going to affect the whole of government. So as one of our panelists today mentioned, that, you know, when the question came about do we pursue a nuclear program, you know, once they knew the Soviets were pursuing it, the answer was yes, we have to pursue it, we have no choice. And so thinking about how our adversaries are having a say in the fight, so to speak, or say in what we do is important, and that needs to be first and foremost as we think about defense planning for the future, especially for congressmen and women.
Shawn Brimley meant an awful lot to all of us at the Center for a New American Security, and of course when we started work on this report, we did not know that this would be his last report. We knew it would be, in all probability, his last report at the Center for a New American Security, but of course none of us foresaw the onset of illness with him and our loss of him. As we look back, it's a tremendous treasure, actually, to have worked with him. I have known Shawn for almost 10 years. We worked together in OSD policy. He and I had corresponded when I was still on active duty. He published a major report of mine through the Center for a New American Security while I was still wearing a uniform. And he recruited me to come to the center and work there. When I came, I actually moved my office to be next to Shawn so that I could come in each day and sit down and talk with him. And so to work with him on this, at last to co-author with him, was a great honor and privilege. It had been one of the things I'd wanted to do as a colleague at the center, and to actually sit down and talk with him about the various different concepts and to get into that sort of idea churn that Shawn could throw himself in was just a tremendous learning experience. And then also, to work, Shawn, it was Shawn's idea that we actually work with the research associates in the defense program and bring them on as co-authors. And this was so typical Shawn Brimley. that you want to work with the young people. He had started out at the center as a research associate, had actually been a Basovich fellow, and then worked his way up to be the executive vice president and director of studies. And so in so many ways, both with the ideas that are encapsulated, talking about the future, you know, sort of beyond even third offset, which was another idea that he had helped to populate, and then also to work and help to mentor some of the young professionals that we have at the Center for a New American Security. It was probably the high privilege of my time at the Center for a New American Security. I hope that they remember him as a brilliant man who was a joy to work with every day, and yet every day at the end of the day could not wait to go home and be with his wife and his children. That he really was the total man in the sense of the balance that he brought to his life, the brilliance he brought to his work, and yet all of us knew where his heart and mind lived every day, and that was with his own family. I hope just to be better at what I do in the way that he set the example, and I'll let Adam speak to his side on it.
Sure. So I guess how I would hope to remember his legacy, Shawn's legacy, is to just be more emblematic in the way that he was with, he's a senior member at the organization, and yet he still didn't just encourage the junior staff to be a part of it, but encourage us to think critically about what we were doing and really commit substance in the way we thought about, you know, the topic. And that's, I think, unique. And so it's certainly a privilege and hope something I can continue forward at when I'm in his position someday.